Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Today in the studio, we have Mr. Dishian, and I refer to him as Mr. Dishian because he actually was a teacher at the high school I went to. Mr. Dishian, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sevag.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into, as I had another professor say, the nitty-gritty of the stuff we're going to talk about. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So you're retired.
Retired after 27 years at Central Unified.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And my last 3 years at Central, I was also privileged enough to teach adjunct at Reedley College in Poli-Sci 2. And before that, I attended local schools. And I have also served in my parish church, the Armenian church. And the church was in a dire necessity of getting deacons a number of years ago, so they scraped the bottom of the barrel and they allowed me to serve on the altar.
Which church is this?
My grandfather, one grandfather went to Holy Trinity, and the other went to St. Paul, and my deacon's classes were at St. Paul.
Okay. Well, welcome to the program again.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about Christmas.
Okay.
But before we get there, I think it's fascinating that you were a teacher for 27 years. So have students changed over the years? I mean, back in the days, what I've learned is back in the days, a lot more students were focused on school. Now it seems like their focus could be other things like work and, other things that come into their lives.
You're right. A lot of students are working. And of course, students in high school, even when I was going to high school, and that's when they burned kerosene lamps in the classroom, there was work experience programs. Given all of the factors that are affecting people and how society has changed, and I'm not trying to come on as an expert because every teacher has to find their way, and I was very privileged to have very good mentors. No. If those students are shown parameters and it's not the teacher affords them a sense of ownership. The biggest concept to get across is it's your grade, not my grade. It's your life, not my life. So order is the first order of business in a classroom, and that includes the instructor. There cannot be double standards. For example, if a teacher says there will be no gum chewing in class, now that sounds very minute, but if you can go back to your high school days, that was monumental. The teacher cannot do that. If you want manners in class, the teacher has to display that as well. And that combined with giving them the sense of ownership, then most students will respond positively. Now, that may take a while. It may take a while. Yes, we do, on the other hand, have an increased number of students who are going through a great deal of difficulty. And sometimes the school is the recipient of that, by no fault of the schools. There are other factors that are involved. We know that. Tragically, we're aware of these things. But at times, I had one principal when I was subbing. He said, I used to demand of all my teachers, whether they were substitute teachers or whether they were first-year teachers or whether they were tenured teachers. I expected the classroom to be neat, clean, warm in the winter, cool in the summer, because he said many of the students did not have that environment at home, and school became a safety area.
Interesting. That's an interesting perspective.
Yes. And it induced them to want to do well. So, yes, there are factors that are a little more acute than when you and I were going to school. But by and large, if students understand what the rules are and that it's nothing personal, most of them will come around. It will be challenging, no doubt. It will be challenging. But in the long run, you do have students that achieve. And that legitimizes a school. And not to put you on the spot, but you are an example. You're an example of Central Unified. And here you're now in the community. You're in a leadership role in the community. That legitimizes a school. The students that go out and achieve, or students who are able to turn themselves around, that legitimizes school.
And with me, it was opportunity. You know,
Yes.
with me, I saw that people who were educated, and I mean, I know there are people who don't get an education are very successful, but for me, I did a balancing test, and I knew that those who were educated got their education, and the higher that education went, they made more money and they had more comfortable jobs. You know, looking at people around me, that's what the direction I went. Talk a little bit about your advice you would give to some of the students out there who want to get into this profession, because teaching is changing.
Yes. Number one, I would suggest to them that they have to want it. Number two, and you did hit on the point very well, and it's not original, but this is what was explained to us when I was doing my student teaching, and it served most of us very well. If a person wants to earn, make their proverbial $5 million in 5 years, they want to have the proverbial country home. Immediately within 5 years. They want to have the Lamborghini, the SUV, and the Rolls Royce in the parking lot, rather than the garage. They want to have a condominium in Carmel. They want to jet off to the south of France every year and be in Cafe Society in New York during the opera season. Don't go into education. You're going to it for the wrong reasons. You're not going to be in that economic status. On the other hand, these are the nuts and bolts. On the other hand, if you do go into education, you're going to live modestly. You'll be able to buy a nice home. You maybe have 2 children, 3 children. You'll be able to send them to college, and every 10 years buy a car and buy a nice mansionette. That was the practical aspect that we received. The other aspect was you have to really want to go into education for the right reasons. Once I heard a student tell the dean of education, or rather one of the professors in education, they asked him, why do you want to go into education? I love kids. He said, I'll tell you what you do. Stop the program, get married and have 6 children and love them to death. That's not why you go into education. You're going into education so to impart information and try to allow students to see themselves where they are and try to edify them. And not to be a dictator, to have them conform to what you want them to say. But we said earlier we said about order. Order as far as behavior, being polite, knowing when to express yourself, how to express yourself. That's what we meant by order. But not saying, well, I have to do this because this is what Mr. Dishian expects me to write down because that's what he said is the truth. That's not why you want to go into education. You want the students to appreciate information, to expand their minds. And like as you were saying a few minutes ago, you begin to see things. You go beyond yourself. You're no longer self-centered. You begin to see there's more out in life. And that is a humbling element. And the teacher can't take credit for that. They can only put the cards on the table and say,
but they can help the student get there.
Yes. And you can help the students once they want help. Once a student wants help, then you'll be an asset in their lives. If a student does not want help, does not care, you go with them for a while and say, okay, you've made your decision.
You know, I'm going to have you back and talk about this because, you know, we've spent 10 minutes talking and we haven't gotten to the reason why I invited you in the first place. But
I'd love to come back.
I think it's fantastic, and we may hit on this again because I really think that you're bringing to light a lot of things out there that, you know, people don't realize. And so let's talk about Christmas a little bit. As we speak, while you and I are sitting here in the studio, there are people who are taking down their Christmas lights, chopping up that Christmas tree, putting away their gifts, and you have people that did this weeks ago. So, December 25th is Christmas. Well, is it? I'll let you answer that question.
In the West, between the years 2 and 300 AD, the Roman Church named December 25th as the Feast of Christmas. And why is that? Rome, aside from all the other churches in the Middle East, had a free hand in cultivating, civilizing Europe. Europe was barbaric primarily. The Visigoths, the Vikings. Life, the value of life was gone. Rome, the eternal city, the once mighty empire, gone. And out of the rubble, out of the ashes of destruction, you have this new order coming up, the church. And what the church in Rome deemed to be essentially effective was they took major feast days in the Roman calendar and tried to Christianize them.
So I want to stop you.
Go ahead.
So celebrations that were already on the calendar that had nothing to do with Christianity.
Correct.
And then what they do?
They substituted the feast of the sun god on December 23rd, S-U-N, sun meaning you're illuminated, you're bright, we're in the light. But it was a perfect fit. Now we bring in Christmas celebration, the Son of God, S-O-N, which is even greater illumination. It was a perfect fit. And so December 25th would become the observance, the main feast day of Christmas. And again, because by 300, the center of Christianity was shifting toward the West, this took off. And some of the Eastern churches would adopt the 25th as well. The original Christmas date that the church settled on was January 6th. And there are many explanations. One of the predominant ones is that they came to agree that the 6th would be the celebration because it was also the day on the calendar that coincided with the day that Christ changed the water into wine at the wedding of Cana. Therefore, he is showing his lordship. So, believing that Christ is born, his lordship is now come into the human pageant, January 6th was the agreed date upon. When did Jesus enter into the human pageant? There's been speculation. Many early church fathers said it would have happened probably in April. But there again, there were those who would argue the point. It's in March. So taking from his life, so now we have January 6th as Christmas observance. Today, most of the churches followed Rome, I should say, except one church. There's one church that did not follow Rome. They retained the Julian calendar, which was established by Julius Caesar. The date was changed, as we said earlier, by the Roman Church to Christianize Roman festival. But by the 1500s, the Pope Gregory, will change the calendar. So now, the church at Rome, which at that time by this time was now called the Roman Catholic Church, but before it was the Greco-Roman, because the Greeks and the Romans were together. They symbolized the western portion of the church. They now celebrated the 25th as Christmas. One church did not follow, and I think you know which church that might have been.
Well, and I know that the Armenian church
Yes.
celebrates on the 6th.
Yes.
And I know some church celebrate on the 7th.
Yes.
But is there a right answer? And the reason I say that is because do we know when Christ was really born?
No. That was part of the reason why they settled on the 6th in the beginning. And again, the right or wrongness, it's a question that many people ask, and I'm not sure we can really say right or wrong.
Right, and I want to throw it out there that
Right.
the purpose of the show is not to say that one is wrong and one is right. The purpose of the show is to maybe educate individuals who may not know. And there's a lot of people who don't know that we don't know when Christ was actually born.
We don't. Again, the early fathers felt it was probably sometime in April. The Armenian Church, as you said, has retained the Julian calendar observance. They did not accept the change made in between 200 and 300 by the Western Church. And by the 1500s, the Armenian Church was entrenched in her own survival. She did not change. So the other churches, the other Eastern churches still celebrate January 6th, the blessing of the water, which symbolizes the baptism of Jesus. The Roman Church sees the 6th still as the feast day of the kings. We had a neighbor, our neighbor just passed away in November. She had lived across the street from us for 55 years. She was Italian. And we would leave our lights on until after the 6th or 7th or 8th, the lights would come down. And she would always marvel, and she said, you know, you remind me of my father, because my father would always tell us, December 25th, we open our gifts, but Christmas is not over until January 6th, the Day of the Kings.
And they were Italian.
They were Italian Roman Catholic. And so they honored the kings. And in fact, my physician, one of my physicians, is Italian and Portuguese. And a few years ago, we brought him some gifts. We missed bringing him some food on the 25th, so we came by the 6th. And he said, what's this for? And we said, Orthodox Christmas. He said, the Day of the Kings, that's right, the Day of the Magi.
So some churches are celebrating that day as the Day of the Magi, and
yes.
The Armenian Church is celebrating it as Christmas.
The Armenian Church retains 3. On the 6th, there is the baptism of Jesus, there is the Epiphany, the coming of the Magi, and there is also the revelation of Jesus to the Gentiles as the Son of God. The baptism is essential because, and not just the Armenian churches, but all the churches realize this, the baptism of Jesus is one of the few times where the Trinitarian doctrine is fulfilled physically. We have at his baptism, we have the voice of God saying, behold, my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. There's the Father speaking. You have the Son being baptized. And then you have the dove descending, representing the Holy Spirit, which the church says this is Trinitarian. This is Trinitarian right now. And that is what is essential about the baptism of Christ. And the fact that he is coming into the human pageant. Also, we settled for the 6th. And this realization of the Trinitarian value suggests to us it's not necessarily important to debate, was he born on the 6th, the 25th, or in April? But somehow he enters the human pageant and is the Son of God. That's the essence. And so to speak, what the churches are saying, we don't want to major in the minors. It's good to know some things, but what is more important? To pinpoint the exact time when he would have entered, or to realize who he is and the importance of what took place at his baptism.
The other thing I really wanted to ask you about is gifts. I mean, a lot of people will celebrate Christmas and will say, oh, I can't wait because I'm going to get great gifts. Or, oh, I can't wait because I want to go shopping and give so-and-so this gift.
Yes.
Talk about what the purpose of giving gifts really is.
Christmas, in a sense, in a word, is giving, if we look at it from the foundation. And we're talking about Christmas, the real Christmas, not a Macy's Christmas, unless we qualify it. So we're talking the religious context of the celebration. What is Christmas? God is giving a portion of himself in human form to raise man up, to edify man. That's it. That's giving.
That's the giving aspect.
There's the giving. There's also the giving of the angel. The angel comes to the shepherds, and what does the angel do? The angel gives news of great tidings, for unto you this day is born a Savior. We also then see the shepherds going to Bethlehem and giving praise and homage to Jesus. We see the Magi traveling hundreds, thousands of miles to come to Bethlehem, and what do? They give gifts, myrrh, frankincense, and gold, valuable gifts. They bow down in homage in respecting, not only respecting, but worshiping Jesus. We also have Saint Nicholas, who was a church leader.
And you know, you're hitting on the points that I exactly want you to go, so thank you for making my job easier this week on the program. But when did Santa Claus come into the picture? Because obviously he wasn't there during the birth of Christ.
Right. Saint Nicholas came in the later centuries in the West, and he was a bishop. He was noted for his philanthropic outreach, especially to children. And he didn't raise money to buy the presents. It was out of his own funds that he gave children gifts in recognition of the giving of Christmas. So we still see that St. Nicholas is a churchman. He is emulating this giving to children because that's what took place at the first Christmas. And from St. Nicholas, what is sometimes the nickname of Santa Claus? St. Nick. So Santa Claus, if you ever looked at it, SC stands for Spirit of Christmas.
Yeah.
And what you associate with Santa Claus? Giving. You associate Santa Claus giving you gifts. And that goes back to what Christmas is all about. Now, unfortunately, in some countries, it becomes very commercialized. Initially, we don't consider Santa Claus of a religious or spiritual origin. But that's where it comes from. It comes from the church itself. What is also interesting about Christmas, unlike Easter or unlike the Eucharist, when Jesus establishes the sacrament of the Eucharist, he says, "Do this in remembrance of me. Each time you eat my body, you drink my blood, you do this in memory of me." There is no specific command to celebrate Christmas within the Scriptures. It's in the Scripture, but this is a tradition outside of Scripture which the church has deemed important, which it is. And Christmas as we know it was not celebrated as heavily until the early 1500s. Actually, in the West, Martin Luther is the one who established these elaborate Christmas celebrations. There again, in time, the church took that on because it was for the good. It was not a negative concept. It was not anti-scriptural. It fit in with scriptural suggestions and realities.
Wow, I could ask you questions for hours.
I don't know if I can give you the answers.
We're running out of time this week on the program, but do you think that people underestimate that portion of it today with, the giving portion of it, the Saint Nick portion of it? Because, again, when I think about Christmas, and there's a lot of people who celebrate Christmas, forget that part of it, in my view. What do you think?
It depends where you're at and where you are. But in this country, in the United States, we have gone to a very strong commercialization of Christmas. And Christmas is a moneymaker economically. It's a moneymaker because there, as I said, if you strip it of its religious origin, then you have more people participating in it. And as you said, we don't worry about Santa Claus coming from St. Nicholas. We're not thinking about the Magi. We're thinking about gifts. All you have to do is go to a shopping center between November 1st and December 1st and see the traffic. And then the day after Christmas with the returns. And some people are very pleasant, many people are not pleasant, and you begin to wonder, we've missed the spirit, the whole spirit of Christmas.
And we are running out of time, but a lot of people are stressed. You read these reports and they'll say people are stressed during the month of December
Yes.
or during the time of Christmas. Are they missing it?
Yes, sometimes we are. We have to buy a bigger gift. We have to buy, Johnny may not like this, but we bought Johnny that Argyle sweater last year. He didn't like it. Yes, but there is something missing, very much so, because the emphasis is on getting gifts. But why are you getting gifts is the question. And not to take refuge in pleasant poetry of an old cliche, but it does abide, and not to sound like a pious Pete here, but we've been brought up being told it's more blessed to give than to receive. And sometimes we may fall prey in putting the accent on on receiving rather than on giving. Because in essence, we give because we have received. And sometimes we can forget that in all of the commercialization of Christmas and all of our man-made expectations. We can lose sight of the fact that we can do something very, very basic. We can tell someone at Christmas, I love you. It's very simple, isn't it? It's a very simple thing to say. It doesn't cost, but it means so much to that person. You go up to your grandmother, or you tell your son or your father or your mother or Auntie Sadie who has nobody and is having Christmas with you. You go up to her and you hug her and say, Auntie Sadie, I love you. We love you and we're glad you're here. You're celebrating Christmas with us. Now maybe you and I we're glad we said that. You don't know what's going inside of Auntie Sadie.
The impact of those comments.
She may feel like she is sitting or standing 10 feet tall. It's such an easy thing to say, but it comes right back to the heart of what Christmas is, giving of self.
And from what I understand in your discussion, the giving doesn't have to be an expensive gift.
No, look how Christ came. Look where, here again is symbolism. Where does he come? He is not born in a palatial mansion, in a palace. He comes to common folk. And Christmas is a leveler because we all, no matter what our pedigree is, you may be worth millions and I may be worth nothing. But somewhere in your pedigree, you go back far enough in generations, there was a common man or woman that burned the midnight oil, that worked and made the money and built upon this, what would become a financial dynasty. And you see, I may be, for myself, I may be where your ancestor was. And that's a leveling factor.
That is an excellent way to put a close to our discussion today. I am sorry we are out of time, Mr. Dishian, this week on the program, but we will have you back to talk about some other things.
I will make one request. I would love to come back, but there's one request from you.
Go ahead.
That you will call me Karl the next time.
Mr. Dishian is what I'll call you next time. And we'll have to thank Mr. Giannini, Ron Giannini, who set this interview up.
I want to thank Mr. Giannini very much because he was instrumental in having me here this evening. So, Mr. Giannini, thank you very much, and I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas. Sevag, it's been a pleasure seeing you again.
Likewise.
And I look forward to talking to you again.
Likewise. That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. Thank you to the volunteer crew that make this and every production possible. Folks, we couldn't do this show without you running the cameras and in the studio. Thank you to our audience members listening to 90.7 FM or watching us on CMAC, Comcast 93, AT&T 99. We hope you enjoyed this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. And the purpose of the program today wasn't to say one is wrong, right or one is wrong. It was just to provide some background on some very important dates to many people. Tune in next week to a new edition of San Joaquin Spotlight.